It is the story of a refugee Trojan prince and how his great-great-great-great-great-great-great-great-great-great-great-great-great-grandsons would be wet-nursed by a she-wolf and later found the greatest city of the ancient world. The story of Rome begins with the end of the Trojan War. After Troy was finally sacked by the Greeks, Aeneid, chief lieutenant of Hector, managed to escape with a few followers. They boarded ships and set out into the Mediterranean to find a new home. Their odyssey took them from Asia Minor to the north coast of Africa, where Aeneas managed to sow the seeds of the three Punic Wars by seducing the Carthaginian queen Dido and then abandoning her. Virgil writes that in the final moments before she committed suicide, Dido cursed the descendants of both to eternal enmity. After securing an archenemy for Rome, Aeneas sailed to the west coast of Italy, where he and his followers hoped to make a settlement. Arriving in the territory of Laurentum, the Trojans were immediately met by armed locals who tried to drive them off. But their king, Latinus, decided to make peace rather than war with the foreigners and offered his daughter Lavinia to Aeneas, solidifying an alliance. This marriage came as quite a shock to Turnus, prince of the Rutuli, a nearby tribe, because Lavinia had already been pledged to him. Angered by this slap in the face, he led an attack on the combined Trojan and Latin forces. The Rutuli were defeated, but King Latinus was killed in the fighting, leaving Aeneas in control of both the Trojans and the Latins, who were rapidly intermarrying into a single people. Vanquished, Turnus and the Rutuli turned north to the rich and powerful Etruscans for help. The Etruscans were more than willing to lend a hand against the growing menace of the Trojan-infused Latins, and attacked. But Aeneas, in his final act, led the Latins to victory, establishing the Tiber River as the boundary between the Latins and the Etruscans. After Aeneas died, his young son Ascanius grew to be king. The town built by the Trojan settlers had become too small for the exploding population, and Ascanius led a group east to found a new settlement called Alba Longa, which would become the seat of the growing Latin kingdom. The kingship was passed from father to son until finally it rested upon the head of a man named Numitor. Numitor had a brother named Amulius who coveted the throne and decided to seize power for himself. Numitor was driven from Alba Longa, all his sons were killed, and his daughter, Rea Silvia, was forced to become a Vestal virgin to ensure she would bear no children who could threaten Amulius. However, after taking the vows, Rea was the victim of rape and consequently gave birth to twin boys. Rea declared that the god Mars was the father, but to no avail, and, for the crime of allowing herself to be raped, she was thrown in prison. The twins were sent to be drowned in the Tiber. However, the men entrusted with the task found the river flooded and left the boys in the sluggish water rather than slogging their way to the river itself, and when the waters receded, the babies were left alive and well in the reeds. Here, legend states that a she-wolf, coming to the river to quench her thirst, found the babies and offered her teats for them to suckle on. A herdsman came upon the scene and gathered the children up from the wolf who had been gently licking them and took them home with him. Even Livy acknowledges that the story of the wolf is a fable and postulates that it may have arisen because the herdsman's wife was a whore named Wolf. The herdsman and his wife raised the boys, named Romulus and Remus, as their own, and soon they grew to be men. Apparently the boys took a liking to fighting the local brigands who raided the countryside. The criminals, angered by the theft of their booty, set a trap for the twins. Romulus managed to escape, but Remus was captured. The brigands took Remus to the local landowner, who turned out to be none other than the exiled Numitor. Numitor was immediately reminded of his twin grandsons, and, realizing that they would be the same age as Remus was now, began to suspect that the boys were his blood. Numitor began making inquiries, and soon learned the particulars of their upbringing and became convinced that they were his daughter's children. The herdsman, knowing Remus was in Numitor's custody, and having himself long suspected that his two boys were of royal blood, decided to tell Romulus the whole story of their discovery by the river. From this, a plan was hatched to return Numitor to the throne. With Romulus leading one group of men and Remus another, they surprised and killed Amulius and brought Numitor back to Alba Longa. Romulus and Remus decided to found a new settlement at the spot where they had been left to drown. There are two accounts of what happened next. One states that trouble arose when the question of who would be senior in the new city was raised. They decided to allow the gods to decide, and each retired to the top of a hill, Romulus the Palatine and Remus the Aventine, to await a sign. Soon enough, 6 vultures landed at the feet of Remus, and when his followers made this known to Romulus, 12 vultures immediately landed at Romulus's feet. A fight broke out, with one side claiming primacy of arrival and the other claiming primacy of number. In this fight, Remus was killed. The other, more famous story is that Remus, mocking his brother, jumped over the partially completed walls, and Romulus, in a fit of anger, killed him, swearing, "So perish whoever shall overleap my battlements." Either way, Romulus obtained sole power, the city was named for him, and he became its first king. The legendary date of foundation is April the 21st, 753 BC.